Hi, I'm Elishva. My mother told me I was hurting the real daughter's self-esteem just by existing. My stepfather said I should stop outshining the family. So they banned me from birthdays, holidays, and when I got married, they didn't even send a text. But what if I told you that wasn't the worst part, because silence can erase you slower than hate ever could? Before we dive in, tell me what time are you listening to this, and where I'd love to know who's out there listening. They say silence can be peaceful. But not that afternoon, not when Ethan and I stood at the edge of my stepfather's backyard, holding a carefully wrapped engagement gift, and no one so much as turned our way. I adjusted the ribbon one more time, pretending that the spring breeze hadn't just carried my presence into a void of blank stares and polite avoidance. Marvin. My stepfather gave us a half nod from across the lawn, mid-con conversation with someone in a crisp blue suit. His nod wasn't a greeting. It was acknowledgement that we existed. Nothing more. Someone waved at us. A short, elderly woman with silver curls I couldn't place. I smiled back out of habit, but even Ethan whispered, "Do you know her?" I shook my head. The backyard was done up like something out of a bridal magazine. Soft white canopies cascading strings of lights. A violinist under the pergola. Callista always liked things. Dreamy Vera, my stepmother, liked things perfect. The guest list was curated. The flowers matched Callista's eyes. Even the cupcakes spelled out C+C forever in gold leaf. I tightened my grip on the gift bag. We started toward the drinks table, but Vera intercepted us with a smile that only touched her lips. "Ethan," she said warmly, touching his arm. "You look wonderful. Military discipline still suits you." Then her gaze shifted to me like a security scan. "Not a hello, Elishva," she said flatly. Not even a nod. Then turning back to Ethan, "Have you two eaten? The bar is open." She walked away before I could answer. We drifted to the side. I chose a corner under the mimosa tree near the edge of the catering station. Ethan stood beside me like an anchor, trying to make it less obvious that I was already fading into the wallpaper. That's when the MC took the mic. "Thank you everyone for joining us in celebrating the love of Callista and Connor. We want to thank all the family members who made this day possible." He paused to scan his notes, to Marvin, Vera, and especially their only daughter, Callista. Only daughter. My stomach didn't drop. It didn't have to. I'd heard that phrase before too many times, but this time Ethan noticed. He leaned toward me. Did he just say, "Yeah," I whispered. Callista stood at the center of it, all glowing. She was delicate, always had been. A kind of vulnerability that made people want to protect her. That's how she got away with so much. Quietly, a childhood full of, "Don't upset Callista. Let Callista go first." Elishva, she's still adjusting photos, lined the entrance to the patio, moments from childhood birthdays, family vacations. I counted 3, that included me, all from when I was under 15. After that, it was as if I disappeared, or maybe been erased. "Do they always act like this?" Ethan asked again. I glanced around. "It's not acting," I said. "It's consistency." We wandered toward the seating area. That's when I caught Vera gliding past a group of older guests, speaking with her usual poise. "Yes, Callista's our only daughter," she said lightly. "She's our heart." I stood 5 feet away. Not even a glance, just a few feet behind the guests. A slideshow played on loop. Family holidays, prom night, high school graduation. None of mine. I'd lived in that house for over a decade. And yet in every scene, I was either cropped out or never invited. I smiled at a passing server and took a tiny fruit tart I didn't want. The thing is, it hadn't always been like this. I remembered being 12, standing on stage at my middle school spelling bee, holding a certificate that still smelled like printer ink. I'd beaten everyone, even the 8th graders. I ran home with the ribbon in my hand. Vera had looked up from her wine glass and said, "You don't have to compete with Callista, sweetie. She's delicate." I was 12. I thought being called strong was a compliment. Today, during Marvin's toast, he clinked his glass and said, "Elkeva's always been strong-willed, a real fighter." The guest chuckled politely. I smiled quietly. I'd mistaken strong-willed as praise for years. Now I understood it meant difficult, disruptive, unwanted. I sipped my drink slowly, trying not to let it sour in my mouth. Ethan stayed close. He didn't say much, but his silence felt like defense. A buffer between me and the thousand subtle cuts that were never loud enough to scream about but deep enough to feel. It wasn't the first time I'd been the outsider in my own family. And for years I'd told myself, this is how blended families worked. You earn your space quietly, you don't rock the boat, you lower your voice and stay polite. But something was different this time. I wasn't angry. Not really, I wasn't even heartbroken. I was just done, pretending I hadn't noticed. Done acting like the snubs were accidental. Done assuming they'd change. During the group photos, Vera pulled Callista and her fiancé into the center. Let's get the family shot. She called out. People gathered quickly. Marvin, some aunt's cousins, the efficient. I started toward the group, but Vera caught my arm lightly. Oh no, sweetie, she said with a soft smile. This one's just for the inner circle. The photographer looked unsure. I stepped back on my own. Ethan stiffened beside me. I didn't make a scene. I didn't cry. I smiled. Said goodbye and left before dessert was served. The morning light slid through the slats of our back deck, soft and golden, stretching across Ethan's flannel shirt and my still bare feet. I hadn't changed out of my old sleep tee, the one with the faded logo from my grad school days. And Ethan had already made coffee, the kind I liked, strong, no cream. We sat quietly, not quite ready to speak about last night. The silence wasn't heavy, but it had weight, like something waiting just out of view. Ethan handed me my mug and sat beside me, one arm resting on the back of my chair. That was strange. He said finally. I gave a quiet laugh, just enough to cover the hollow in my chest. Family events always are. No, he said, shaking his head. That wasn't awkward. That was something else. You were barely in the pictures. And Vera? He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. We both remembered the way Vera's eyes skated past me, like I was part of the furniture. Something to walk around, not acknowledge. I pulled my phone from my lap, intending to distract myself with anything, emails, grocery apps, even the weather. But instead there it was a single banner at the top of my screen. You've been removed from Callista's wedding group. At first I thought it was a glitch. Maybe she'd created a new thread or updated the name. But when I tapped in, the group no longer existed in my list. The icon was gone. The old photos gone. Not archived, not replaced, just gone. No message, no, hey, just downsizing the group, or we're switching platforms. Nothing. I scrolled back through my text just to be sure, but there was no explanation, just silence. Ethan leaned over to glance at the screen, his brow furrowed. Seriously, they just removed you. I nodded slowly, still staring at the now blank space where the chat had been. Apparently, I didn't make the cut. Neither of us said anything for a moment. I swirled the coffee in my cup, letting the warmth soak into my hands while something else slowly cooled inside me. I opened my camera roll and looked for screenshots I'd saved from the group florist options, dress colors, ideas I'd sent for the table decor. I'd offered to help with logistics months ago. Even sent links to venues when they were still deciding. Every message was polite, short replies, mostly emojis. No one ever said thanks. Back then I thought they were just busy. Now I saw it for what it was. I wasn't included. I was tolerated. A placeholder filling the awkward space between Marvin's before and after the daughter from another life. Someone they kept at the edge of the photo frame, just enough for appearances never fully in focus. Ethan shifted in his seat. Why do you keep doing this, Elle? I looked at him, startled. Doing what? I asked. Trying, he said gently. Trying to be included. Trying to be one of them. I opened my mouth to argue, but the words didn't come. They're still family. I said instead, my voice thinner than I meant. Ethan didn't push back. He just nodded once and reached for my hand, letting me have the space to hear myself, and I did. The words felt empty, familiar, yes, but not true. Not anymore. I stood up and walked inside, needing motion, needing something solid to keep me from unraveling. In the kitchen, I poured more coffee and leaned against the counter. The silence in the house was different than the silence at that party. Here it was peaceful, respectful. There it had been calculated, and I'd been complicit in it. I walked into the study and sat down scrolling again. Not out of obsession, but clarity. I needed to see it one more time. Needed to prove to myself that I hadn't imagined it. In the archive thread, I found a message I'd sent 2 months ago. Hey, I'm happy to help with the invitations. If you need it, I used to do design stuff. No response. Another from a few weeks later. What's the dress code for the engagement party? Want to make sure Ethan and I don't show up. Looking out of place. The only reply was from Vera. One line. Just wear something simple. Not even a thank you. Not even a name. My thumb froze over a group selfie Callista had posted right after getting engaged. Her hand front and center, the ring visible. Marvin was next to her, beaming Vera. Had her arm around her shoulder. There were champagne glasses, smiles, hashtags. And in the comments, our perfect girl. The only one who got it right. Our family's pride. I wasn't tagged. I wasn't mentioned. I wasn't even in the room. I closed the app and leaned back, letting the weight of it all settle. And then, without intending to, I remembered something I hadn't thought of in years. High school graduation, I'd been lining up backstage, wearing my cap a little too tight. And clutching the program in nervous fingers, I remember hearing the principal pause before reading my name. He'd hesitated, glancing over at Marvin. Later, I asked Marvin why I wasn't listed under his last name. It's for paperwork reasons, he said, straightening his tie. Your mother's maiden name just makes it easier. Back then, I'd nodded, smiled, told myself it didn't matter, but it did because it always mattered to him who belonged and who didn't. My phone buzzed on the table, snapping me back. It was a text from my cousin Maya. Hey, I thought it was kind of messed up. You weren't in the family photos last night. You okay? That was it. No follow-up, no offer to call. I stared at the screen, watching the message hover in silence. One cousin out of over 20 relatives, and even she wasn't reaching in, just asking from the shore. I sat with that for a long moment. Then I opened the group chat. One last time, hovered over the thread and pressed delete conversation. I didn't do it out of spite or anger or any desire to make a statement. I did it because I was done pretending, done trying to convince people to see me done. Sitting at the edges of other people's stories and hoping someone might wave me in that night after Ethan had gone to bed. I sat alone in the living room, no TV, no music, just me, the quiet, and the unmistakable feeling of something shifting inside. But just as I began pulling away, they pulled me back in the worst way possible. I had just started sleeping again. Not the kind where you toss all night and convince yourself 6 broken hours count as rest. I mean real sleep, quiet, still. The kind where your muscles forget how to brace themselves. I'd gone to bed early the night before. Ethan had kissed my forehead, said 1 foot out is still a step forward, and left me with tea and a blanket. I didn't dream, I didn't cry. That afternoon, the mail came later than usual. I didn't even check it right away. It wasn't until I passed through the kitchen to rinse a few dishes that I saw the envelope square stiff, heavier than normal. No return address, just the words private and confidential printed clean and cold on the front. I thought it might be something from the HOA. Maybe a legal notice about parking fines. Something boring, annoying. I sliced it open. With a butter knife. Inside was a tri-folded letter on thick paper embossed at the top, with a law firm I didn't recognize. My eyes skimmed the first line, then I froze. Notice of disinheritance and formal severance of parental obligations. It took me a second to actually breathe. My thumb pressed into the fold so hard the paper creased. I read on the document was clear, brutally so. Signed by Marvin E. Rollins and Vera M. Rollins, it stated without apology or even sentiment that I was no longer considered a dependent heir or family member in any form. As of the date of this notice, Elishva Rollins shall not be entitled to estate consultations, family property privileges, or inclusion in legacy considerations. It continued, this decision is made not out of malice, but to preserve harmony within the family unit. That line was underlined, bold harmony. That's what they called it. I stared at that word like it might rearrange itself into something human. My fingers trembled as I placed the letter on the counter, but I didn't crumble with it. Not like I thought I would. I just stood there for a moment, looking out the kitchen window into the pale late afternoon light spilling across the backyard. A squirrel darted up the maple tree. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked once and fell quiet. My body moved before my brain caught up. I slid down the cabinet until I was sitting on the tile floor, knees drawn in the folded letter beside me. My breath was shallow, but I wasn't gasping. My hands shook, but not from panic. It felt like I had been waiting for this without knowing. Some people get hit by betrayal like a truck. Others watch it arrive slowly, and when it finally lands, there's no shock. Just silence. I sat like that until the kitchen grew darker. Then when Ethan came home, he kicked off his shoes, called out a cheerful, "Hey, babe," and rounded the corner only to stop when he saw me still on the floor. His eyes fell to the letter beside me. He picked it up. It didn't take long for him to read it. He didn't sit, didn't blink much. "What the hell is this?" His voice was tight. "Legal severance." I said it like it was a weather report. He looked at me. "Are they serious? You're not... This isn't normal." "Who does this?" I didn't answer. "I'm calling Marvin." "No." I raised a hand. "Don't leash. It's done, but it's not right," he said, eyes searching mine. "No," I whispered. "It's not, but it's real." He crouched beside me, pulling me into his chest. I didn't cry. I just let the weight of him anchor me while my mind kept repeating. They wanted me gone. Not just out of photos, out of history. Later that night, long after dinner sat cold and forgotten on the stove, I found myself opening the small wooden keepsake box tucked in the back of my closet. It smelled faintly of lavender and old paper. Inside, wrapped in faded tissue, was the glass hairpin Vera had once told me was for real daughters only. I remembered the exact moment she said it softly while brushing Romy's hair before a party I'd been standing in the doorway. Just 15, I'd asked if I could borrow it. She'd smiled at me like I'd asked for something impossible. "This one's special, sweetie." Maybe someday. She never meant someday. I held the pin in my hand. Cool, delicate, sharp at one end. I could have smashed it. Could have buried it in the trash and never looked back. But instead I walked into the bedroom and set it gently on my vanity, right where I could see it, not out of hope and not for memory's sake, just so I wouldn't forget the difference between being included and being tolerated. And then when the house had gone quiet and Ethan had finally drifted off, I sat down at my laptop, created a new folder, named it Freedom Files. No tears, no fire, just quiet resolve. It wasn't revenge. Not yet. It was something simpler. A beginning that no one could erase. But what they did next after cutting me off wasn't about peace. It was about control. 3 days had passed since I held that letter in my hands. I hadn't shown it to anyone else beyond Ethan. Hadn't replied to the silence that followed. No calls, no emails, not even a forwarded bill. It was like I'd been erased, and they were satisfied with that. I should have been relieved. Instead, I felt watched, as if something else was brewing just behind the curtain. It was late Thursday afternoon. The sky outside had gone from blue to a heavy gray, the kind that presses down on your chest. I just shut down my laptop after grading a stack of midterms when my phone rang. It was Ethan's mom. Her voice, usually calm and warm, cracked through the line. "Elishva," she said barely above a whisper. "You need to check Vera's Facebook right now." I didn't ask why. The way she said my name, that wasn't a suggestion. I walked straight to my desktop and opened Facebook. A few clicks later, there it was. Pinned at the top of Vera's page, framed by a polished family photo taken just last month, was a long post titled, "Why We Had to Let Go of a Toxic Presence in Our Family." I clicked. It wasn't vague. It wasn't impulsive. It was methodical worded. Like a legal brief, I could picture her sitting at her desk, sipping tea, combing over every line, like she was scrubbing tarnish from silverware. It read, "Sometimes love means letting go. For the protection of our peace, we've had to make the painful decision to distance ourselves from someone who has consistently disrupted our family harmony." Her presence has brought tension, jealousy, and emotional instability. We've tried. God knows we've tried. But blood doesn't always make family, and bitterness isn't something you can cure with kindness. To those asking, yes, this was a long time coming. No names, but every line was a fingerprint I kept reading. Our daughter Calista deserves to enjoy her new chapter without feeling overshadowed. No bride should feel scrutinized on her wedding day. No family should be forced to choose between unity and toxicity. 312 shares. Dozens of comments, people I barely knew. Family, friends I hadn't seen since high school graduation. Even strangers from her quilting group were chiming in. So brave of you to speak out, she sounds jealous. Cutting toxic people is hard, but necessary. A few asked, is this about your stepdaughter? One woman commented, that girl always looked like she was trying too hard. It was the kind of post you couldn't respond to directly, because technically it wasn't about me. And yet, every word was a knife. I don't remember sitting down, but at some point I was in the chair in the corner of my home office. My hands clenched so tightly, my wedding ring left a mark. The door opened gently. Ethan walked in still in his scrubs, his shoulders sagging. From the day he saw my face, didn't speak. Just walked behind me, wrapped his arms around me from behind, and whispered, "What happened?" I pointed at the screen. He read in silence. The kind of silence that builds heat, not calm. I'm calling her. He said, voice, low eyes, dark. No, Elishva, this is beyond disrespect. This is character assassination. I know, I said quietly, but that's what she wants, for us to fight in her arena. She humiliated you in front of, I'm not going to let her make me a spectacle. I turned back to the screen. I began screenshotting every word, every comment, every share. I'll respond, I said, but not like this. Not on her terms. Ethan was still fuming, pacing now, but he didn't stop me. Around 6, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a call from school. It was Diane, my supervisor. I hadn't even told her what was happening. She started softly. Hey, Ellis Shiva, I just wanted to give you a heads up. Someone forwarded me a post making the rounds. Something about a family matter, but tied to our school values. It's vague, but your name came up. My mouth went dry. I cleared my throat. I saw it. It's about me, but none of it's true. There was a long pause. I know how. She said, we're not taking any action, but I figured you deserve to know. That moment, those 3 words, I know, felt like a hand on my back steadying me on a cliff. After we hung up, I walked down the hallway to the guest room. My old writing space, the one I hadn't touched since the last fight with Vera, nearly a year ago. There in the bottom drawer was an old leather journal. I flipped through pages filled with my younger self's handwriting letters. I never sent dreams. I never said aloud truths. I'd swallowed for peace. And there it was on the last page I'd written before I stopped altogether. They will never love me if I shine, I stared at it. That version of me, so quiet, so desperate to be chosen, I picked up a pen and underlined the sentence twice. Then slowly, I wrote beneath it. So I'll stop asking. I didn't cry. I closed the journal and stood up, my spine a little straighter. Later that night, once the kitchen was clean and the house was still, I opened my private Instagram account. I hadn't posted in weeks, but tonight I wrote one line. Truth doesn't need to shout, it just waits. No hashtags, no tags, no drama. Just a line like a seed. And the quiet understanding that I wasn't hiding anymore. But when the lies started affecting my career, that's when I acted. It began on a Monday. I'd barely stepped into my classroom, coffee still untouched on my desk, when I got the call from HR Elishva. Can you come upstairs now? That kind of tone doesn't leave much room for guessing. The moment I walked in, I knew something was off. The HR office felt too formal for a school like ours. 2 chairs, 1 folder, and Janice, the HR director, seated like she'd rehearsed the next 10 minutes all weekend. She didn't say good morning, just slid a paper toward me. It was a screenshot of Vera's Facebook post. Underneath, another print out an email. No name, just concerned party. It had been sent directly to the board of directors. The email accused me of hostile behavior toward children, emotional instability rooted in unresolved family dynamics, and concerning mood swings in front of students. I sat still. Let her keep going. Janice cleared her, throat looking more uncomfortable than stern Elisha. I'm asking you this formally. Do you know who may have submitted this? I answered without blinking. Yes, my mother and her husband Marvin Ellison. Her lips parted slightly. Then she reached under the folder and pulled out a final sheet. It was traced through our systems. The email was sent using a business domain linked to a consulting firm, Ellison Management Group. I didn't flinch, but something in my hand resting on the armrest curled into a tight fist. I'm not asking you to respond to the content, Janice added more gently. But we had to call this meeting because the post has over 700 shares now. It's public, and some families have seen it. Of course they had. I let out a breath steady and long. I understand what happens next. Before she could answer, there was a knock at the door. It was the school principal, Mr. Donner, and behind him 2 other teachers, people I'd known for years, Caroline, the speech pathologist, and Rich, our music director. None of them had been scheduled for this. Mr. Donner stepped in first. Sorry to interrupt, but I'd like to be present for this part. Janice looked surprised. This is unorthodox, so is attacking one of our best staff members through social media, he replied calmly. Then turned to me. We're aware of the post and the accusations. Caroline stepped forward, her voice firm. If you're questioning Elishva's behavior around children, I want to go on record. She stayed after hours to help students that weren't even hers. She tutors, she mediates conflicts. She's been a safe space for kids who don't have one at home. Rich added, she's the kind of teacher who doesn't just do the job, she shows up hard. I didn't cry, but I wanted to. I think they could tell. Instead, I looked at each of them and said quietly, thank you. The meeting ended soon after. No disciplinary action. No warning, just a note in the file that an anonymous complaint had been reviewed and found inconclusive. But the damage, well, it had already started long before the email. That night, Ethan and I sat in our small living room, the hum of the refrigerator, the only noise between us. He hadn't touched his dinner. I finally broke the silence. They're not trying to just embarrass me. He nodded slowly. They're trying to erase your reputation. I looked at him. No, it's worse. They're trying to erase my right to exist without them, without owing them, without apologizing for walking away. He didn't speak after that. Just reached over, wrapped his hand around mine. Later that night, I started a folder. I labeled it Legal Readiness. Not because I planned to sue tomorrow, but because this wasn't random, it was planned. And now I had to start documenting everything. While Ethan got ready for bed, I pulled down an old box from the top of my closet. Inside was a stack of journals I hadn't opened in years. One had a sunflower sticker on the front, faded now. I flipped through until I found the page I remembered exactly where to stop. It was written in my 12-year-old handwriting. They will never love me if I shine too bright. Right below that, someone Vera had scribbled with a red pen back then. Don't be dramatic, be humble. I stared at the line for a long time, then grabbed a pen, underlined my own sentence twice. And underneath it, I wrote in slow, careful print, so I'll stop asking. The next morning before school, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea. Ethan had already left for work. The sunlight hit the glass just right. I opened my laptop, logged into my private account, and posted one sentence. Truth doesn't need to shout. It just waits. Then I closed the screen, stood up, and opened a new browser tab. It was time to update my will. It wasn't a grand gesture. It wasn't revenge. It was a line in the sand. From this point forward, I decided any child I ever have or adopt or choose to mentor, they will never doubt where they stood with me. There would be no blurred edges, no favoritism, no subtle slights masked as concern. Because I knew how it felt to live on the outside while everyone else pretended the line didn't exist. 2 weeks passed, 2 weeks of quiet, brittle mornings, where I made my tea slower as if gentleness could somehow shield me from the steady erosion of what used to be family. I stayed away from social media. Ethan had helped me lock everything down after the HR scare. No more surprises, at least not from strangers, but family. That was another matter. On a rainy Thursday afternoon, a pale pink envelope arrived in my mailbox. I turned it over in my hands, already knowing the return address was Callista's, but the handwriting, that unmistakable looping script, belonged to Vera inside. Was the expected invitation, complete with little golden pacifiers and baby ducks. Please join us in celebrating Callista's new chapter. It read in pastel cursive below, that in darker ink, Vera's handwriting, again one final line. Please be mindful not to draw attention. Let Callista have her day. I stared at that sentence for a long time. Not even ruin her day, just draw attention. As if my very presence might somehow tip the sun off course, I didn't cry. I didn't even frown. I just placed the card on my kitchen table, poured myself another cup of chamomile, and whispered, still afraid I might shine by accident. The baby shower was held on a Saturday afternoon in the event room of a small banquet hall just outside Joliet. Vera's church circle had gone all out. Ribbons-themed cupcakes, a gift table shaped like a bassinet. Everything was dipped in pink and gold. I arrived in soft blue, a modest dress, no makeup. My hair pulled into a low bun, clean, presentable, and unshakably calm. As I stepped through the double doors, a few heads turned. Whispers stirred the air like a breeze. A woman near the drink station leaned toward another and said under her breath, "That's the one they wrote about on Facebook." Vera spotted me almost immediately. Her fingers clutched Callista's forearm, and I saw Callista flinch just slightly. It was a reflex I recognized well. Still, I offered a small smile and kept walking. I wasn't here to reclaim space. I just wasn't going to keep disappearing from it. I stayed near the far wall, speaking only when spoken to. A few women I knew from years ago offered stiff hells. Others kept their eyes on their cake. I could feel the performance in the room, the effort to make this event sparkle, to distract from the undercurrent everyone felt but no one named. It was midway through the afternoon, just as they began setting up for the group photo, that Vera approached. She wore a lavender shawl and that ever-gentle church lady smile. "Elishava," she said, her tone coated in honey. "I'm so glad you could come." I nodded. "Thank you." She leaned in just enough for a few other women to gather loosely near us, pretending to refill cups, fix dresses, check their phones. Then she said it. "It would mean so much if you could give Callista some space. Maybe skip the group photo." I blinked. "Excuse me," she kept the smile. "You've always been so thoughtful, and this is such a big day for her. We'd hate for anyone to feel overshadowed." I said nothing. Her voice lowered a little, and so did her eyes. "If you love your sister, you'll step back again." That word again settled in my chest like a stone. Not asked, not requested. Commanded gently, sweetly, but still a command. I glanced around. They were listening, waiting. I looked at Vera, then passed her to the photo backdrop. Callista stood there, one hand on her belly, the other smoothing the hem of her maternity dress. She wasn't smiling. I inhaled slowly, then nodded once. "All right." I said. I didn't come to pose. I stepped away quiet. I didn't make a scene. I didn't argue, but I didn't leave the building. Not yet. Instead, I walked over to the gift table, nestled among the wrapped presents and pastel bows. I placed a plain white envelope sealed, no glitter, no note. On the front, in my own steady handwriting, to Callista. Inside was a notarized document, a formal revocation. Her name, previously listed as a beneficiary in my personal trust, was now legally removed. No drama, no declarations, just clarity. As I turned to leave, one of Vera's friends, Delilah, I think, touched my arm. "What was that envelope, dear?" I smiled. Just a little something to match her energy. Back at home that evening, I sat at my writing desk and opened my old journal. It had been a long time since I'd written in it. The leather cover still smelled like dust and cedar. I wasn't born to disappear. I wrote slowly. I just got good at it to survive. I reached into the top drawer and pulled out an old photo. Me and Callista as toddlers in our backyard. She was grinning, drenched in chocolate ice cream. I was beside her, 1 foot in the kiddie pool, holding a paper fan I'd made in art class. Vera had taken the photo. I remembered what she'd said right after. "Don't be too loud, dear," she'd whispered to me that day. "You don't want Callista to feel small." I ran my fingers along the faded edge of the picture. I wasn't too loud. I murmured to the quiet room. I just existed. After washing the dishes and setting Ethan's lunch for the next day in the fridge, I opened my laptop and pulled up my contacts. There was a name I hadn't reached out to in over a year. Monique Harris, a nonprofit attorney I'd met at a gala fundraiser for educational equity. I typed one line into the message box. "I think I'm ready to formalize some boundaries." Then I hit send. The baby shower was a week behind me, but its residue lingered. I'd gone quiet. Not defeated, just still. Some battles you walk away from, not because you lost, but because your silence says more than shouting ever could. It was just past 7 a.m. on Saturday when I heard the knock, a soft, persistent rhythm on my front door, followed by a gentle voice calling my name, Alicia. "It's Diane." I slipped on a sweater and opened the door. Diane stood there in her gray windbreaker hair, still wrapped in foam rollers. She looked like someone who'd walked over fast, maybe even anxious. "I hate to bother you this early, honey," she said, eyes scanning my face like she was checking for signs of something deeper. "But I thought you should know your landlord's been getting calls." I blinked. "Calls?" She nodded, glancing toward the street, like it might explain something. "Somebody's been saying you're unstable, that you're harassing your family, that the neighbors are concerned." I swallowed. "What neighbors?" They didn't say just that. It was a pattern of behavior and that you might be a risk to the neighborhood. Diane hesitated. But the number they used, Chicago area code. I asked, my stomach tightened. "Was it Vera?" I asked, "or Marvin?" She gave me a look, one that said she wasn't going to name names, but she didn't need to. "Just thought you should hear it from someone who doesn't have an agenda," she said softly. "I told my son, he's the one who overheard it on speaker, that you're quiet, respectful, pay your rent on time, and that none of this sounded like you." I managed a tired smile. "Thanks, Diane, I mean it," she nodded. "Just keep your head up, baby. Some people are allergic to peace." By Monday morning, it was no longer a rumor. A white envelope sat in my mailbox bearing my name in neat typed letters. Notice of lease review. No explanation, no accusation. Just a formal notification that my teenie was now being monitored due to neighborhood concern. I called my landlord that afternoon. Todd answered after 3 rings. He sounded uncomfortable. "Hi, Alicia, I was actually going to call you today. I got the letter." "Yeah," he said, dragging the word. "Look, I just want to be upfront. We received some communications last week. Someone claiming you'd been causing tension with your family, suggesting there were disturbances, even emotional outbursts." I let out a quiet breath. "And you believe them? It's not that. I mean, nothing's been documented. No police calls, no neighbor complaints, not really. But when people start calling and saying there's a problem tenant, we have to at least review. So I'm not being evicted. No, just flagged." I kept my voice even. "Thanks for letting me know." But after we hung up, I sat there staring at the screen. My chest tight, my fingertips cold. They weren't just trying to control the narrative anymore. They were trying to control my shelter, my breath, my peace. I reached for the leather folder tucked behind my bookshelf, the one that held every important paper I hadn't dared throw out. I printed what I needed, the Facebook post. Vera never deleted screenshots from the baby shower text, and the transcript from that HR mediation meeting 2 months back, where Vera had accidentally copied my supervisor on a note calling me emotionally erratic. And then I added one more page, a clause notarized and signed 8 months ago when I'd renewed my lease. Back then, I'd asked a friend, a lawyer who volunteered at a nonprofit I supported, to look over the lease with me. She'd added a provision just in case, just a thin paragraph tucked neatly into the addendum. No action may be taken against the tenant based solely on third-party allegations unless verified. Through formal inquiry, Todd had signed it. I had countersigned. We both had a copy. I drafted a simple email, attached the documents, then hit send. Subject reminder, lease addendum clause. Body, dear Todd. Just a courteous reminder of the signed clause included in my lease renewal, attached again here. No further action is required unless formal grounds emerge. Kind regards, Alicia. I closed the laptop and stood still for a moment. Let the silence fill the corners of the room. 3 hours later, I got his reply, Alicia. Thank you for the documentation. You are in good standing. We will disregard the external calls and close the review. Best, Todd. No apologies, no explanations, just a quiet reversal. It wasn't relief I felt. Not exactly. It was something firmer, proof that I didn't have to fall apart to be heard. That sometimes armor isn't loud, it's legal. That night after I made dinner and washed the dishes, I sat at my desk and opened my web browser. I searched for something I'd thought about once late at night, but never followed through on a domain. I typed it in, checked its availability, and paid for it outright. Then I uploaded a single page, plain white background, black text in the center. If they speak publicly, I will too. Fully no photos, no names, but enough. Enough to remind them I wasn't hiding, I was just choosing not to fire the first shot. I had just rinsed out my coffee mug and placed it gently in the rack, when the knock came, 3 sharp taps, firm and spaced. Not like a delivery, not like a neighbor. I opened the door to find no one there. Just an envelope. It was cream cold. Thick stock, not a wrinkle on it. My name was printed in sharp serif font. No handwriting, no return address. Just sterile professionalism. I brought it inside, closed the door with a strange sense of finality, and sat down at the kitchen table. The weight of the paper in my hands already told me what was coming. When I slid my finger beneath the flap and pulled the letter free, the firm logo of a Chicago law office stared back at me like a cold pair of eyes. Dear Miss Alicia Fay, this letter serves as formal notice of a cease and desist regarding your continued dissemination of private family matters in a manner that may constitute emotional harm to immediate relatives by, I paused, reread, any further threats implied or direct regarding online publications or statements will be considered grounds for civil action. There was a highlighted sentence at the bottom, one that burned more than them. Rest, your online threats may constitute emotional harm to immediate relatives. I pushed back my chair, stood up slowly, then laughed short, bitter, almost like it didn't belong to me. I haven't even said a word yet, I whispered. But they knew I could, and that terrified them. I took a photo of the letter front and back and sent it straight to Julia, my attorney and longtime friend. Her response came within minutes. Got it, wanna hop on a call? I clicked yes without hesitation. When she answered, her tone was cool, measured. This is a bluff. Legally flimsy. They're trying to scare you into silence before you say anything that embarrasses them. I stayed quiet, not because I didn't agree, but because a deeper feeling had settled into my chest. Not fear, not shock, something colder. They crossed a line, Julia. You bet they did, she said. But here's the good news. This gives us an opening. She walked me through a counter strategy. Nothing aggressive, nothing theatrical, just facts delivered firmly. I forwarded her a PDF of the original Facebook post where Vera called me emotionally unstable, screenshots of the group chat where Marvin had written, "We'll make her move, she doesn't belong here anyway." HR documentation from the meeting I had requested after the baby shower, outlining the psychological impact. And finally, Julia drafted a single-page response to Vera's counsel to whom it may concern. My client has not made any public statement regarding private family matters. However, should this harassment continue, we will have no choice but to pursue legal action under defamation and emotional distress provisions. Attached are Exhibits A through C, documenting past behavior toward Miss Fay. I read it twice, then nodded, "Send it by evening." Julia confirmed it had been received. No reply yet, but it was only a matter of time. I thought that was the end of it, but just before 8, Astro P. And my phone rang, unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Then I saw the transcript. Hi, Alicia. It's Greg, your uncle. I wanted to talk if you're open. It's not about them, just about you. Greg, my father's youngest brother. I hadn't spoken to him in over a year, maybe more. Still holding the phone, I stepped onto the back porch. The sun had just dipped behind the trees, casting long golden shadows across the lawn. I pressed callback. He picked up on the second ring. Eli Cheva. His voice was scratchier than I remembered, a little slower but warm. I heard about the letter, he said after a beat. Vare's been calling the cousins, said you've been threatening the family. My stomach tensed, but he added, we know that's not you. I didn't say anything. Couldn't your dad, he said quietly. He was so proud of you. He said you were the one who didn't fold. And I want you to know you're not standing alone in this. I let out a breath. I didn't know I'd been holding the kind that comes from years of carrying things silently. Thank you, Uncle Greg. We didn't talk long, just enough to feel like a bridge hadn't been burned on both ends. After we hung up, I walked back inside and opened the closet in my hallway. From the back corner behind an old box of winter boots, I pulled out something I hadn't touched in nearly 5 years. My father's leather briefcase. I placed it on the dining table and unbuckled the aged latches. Inside were mostly documents, some financial, some old project files. But one folder caught my eye. Yellow dog-eared his will. I'd seen it before, skimmed through the logistics. But this time, I read slower, deeper. On the last page in the margins, beside a section outlining his wishes for my inheritance, was a handwritten note. Simple, underlined twice, for Elisha. Build something of your own. Don't beg anyone to make space for you. I sat there in silence for a long time. Not crying, not angry. Just still. Like something inside had clicked into place. Later that night, while washing a dish, I noticed a vibration from my phone on the counter. I dried my hands and picked it up. A text from Callista. Can we talk, just us? I stared at the screen, blinking. This girl, my cousin. My betrayer, the one who watched everything and said nothing, wanted to talk. I paced once around the kitchen, then typed, you had so many chances to do the right thing. If we talk now, it's on my terms. Her reply came within seconds. Okay, I didn't trust it, but I also didn't want to walk away from it. So I thought carefully, then texted again. Meet me Thursday, 3 p.m. Corner Cafe, Davis Street, Public. And then one more message sent to Julia. Can you be on standby? I've agreed to meet Callista, just in case I slipped my phone into the charger, and stood quietly for a few moments, watching the screen go dark. Tomorrow I'd sit across from the person who watched me be humiliated. But I wasn't walking into that meeting hoping for an apology. I was walking in ready. Callista showed up 17 minutes late. I was already seated on the patio of a quiet cafe near Lakeside, sipping a lukewarm chamomile. The day was gray, overcast, not cold, but carried the stillness of a turning page. She wore no makeup. Her hair was pulled back into a rough ponytail. Even from across the table, I could see the fatigue carved into her face. Not just physical, soul-deep weariness. She barely met my eyes when she sat down. I'm sorry I'm late, she muttered, eyes scanning the napkin dispenser like it might give her courage. Then in a voice so low, I leaned in. I didn't know what they were doing to you. I thought you were stronger than all of us. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The words hung between us, messy and unfinished. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened her purse and took out a crumpled envelope. Unsealed, frayed at the edges, they maxed out my credit. Took out lines in my name I didn't even know until the call started. Then the emails. Then the apartment threatened eviction. She swallowed hard. I need help. You're the only one who knows how to fix this. I tilted my head slightly. Not in judgment, just examining. And when they were crushing me, I said slowly, you stayed silent because you figured I'd survive. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Her eyes welled, and for a moment I thought she might break. Is that what you believed? I pressed softer this time. She nodded. I thought you'd bounce back like always. She whispered, you always did. I reached into my bag and slid a card across the table. Not a magic solution, just a lifeline, an honest one. It was for a financial restoration advisor, someone who handled identity misuse, someone who helped victims, not families. I'm not your cleanup crew, I said gently. Not anymore. Callista stared at the card, eyes glassy. She didn't move to touch it. Are we still sisters? She asked after a long pause. I let the question linger. We never stopped. I replied, my voice firm, but not cruel. But you stopped acting like it. That was the truth. And for the first time, she didn't flinch from hearing it. After we parted ways with no promises, no hugs, no tidy reconciliation, I walked the long way home. It was already dusk when I stepped through my front door. The lights inside glowed soft and warm, but the quiet felt heavier than usual. I set my keys on the counter, poured a glass of water, and moved toward my desk. There, resting like it had been waiting all day, was a single sheet of folded paper. No envelope, no return address, just my mother's handwriting on the front. Ellie Schwa. I sat slowly, opened it. The note read, "You've always tried to be the bigger person. I hope that made you happy." No signature, no apology, no acknowledgement of the damage. I read it twice, then a third time. Then I walked to the cabinet where I kept my important records and gently placed the letter into a fire-safe lockbox. Not to destroy, not to answer, just to remind myself who I used to beg to be seen by and why I never would again. A few weeks later, I signed the founding papers for the nonprofit I'd dreamed of quietly for years. It was called the Second Daughters Foundation. Its mission to support women estranged from their families through years of emotional scapegoating. Women who had been labeled the difficult one, the cold one, the too independent one, for simply saying no. At the small opening gathering in a repurposed community center near the lake, I stood behind the mic hands, steady heart, strangely calm. Sometimes I began voice clear. Strength doesn't look like shouting. Sometimes it's the ability to stay silent until the noise longer defines who you are. They listened not with applause, but with stillness, the kind you can feel. Later that evening, long after the chairs had been stacked and the last cups thrown out, I took a walk along the lakefront trail. The wind was cool against my cheek. I tucked my hands in my coat pockets, breathing deep. In my head, a single thought emerged quiet, clean. I didn't lose my family. I just stopped auditioning for it. I smiled, not because I won, but because, for once, I stopped playing. That weekend, we set up the first mailbox drop for the foundation, a physical box outside the building where anyone could leave stories, notes, or questions anonymously. At the end of the day, I went out to check it. Inside, among the flyers and form letters, there was one small envelope, handwritten, familiar cursive. I opened it slowly. It read, "I think I understand now. Please may I start